think my mom has a demon attached to her. I recently made the difficult decision to cut contact with my mother. It wasn't an easy choice, but after years of dealing with her narcissistic behavior in the presence of malevolent spirits that seemed to be attached to her, I realized it was the best option for my own well-being. It's a complicated situation, and while I won't deny that there are other reasons for our estrangement, the spirit was definitely a factor. It all started when I was just 6 years old. My mother and her friend became interested in witchcraft after watching the movie The Craft. As someone who's pagan myself, I know that playing with things you don't understand is never a good idea. My mother started off with well-intentioned blessings and some folklore magic, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She used random objects to reach out to spirits, believing anything that would respond and move an object. When we moved into our home, things got more active and weirder. I remember at first we moved in, a spirit would slam our basement door shut and stomp down the stairs. At first I thought it was just my parents having a fight, but they were always sleeping in their room when this happened. The dining room chairs would move on their own, with the chairs being pulled out or pushed in when we left them out. The most terrifying experience was when we left the chairs pushed in at the table, and after we were leaving the room, a few moments, we heard the scuff of a chair on the floor. When we looked, the chairs were resting on the top of the table face down, like they do in bars when they close up for the night. But that was just the beginning. We heard someone yell, "Shut the fuck up," from the basement when my parents were yelling at my brother and me. I don't blame the ghost, honestly. One night, my brother and I complained of smelling rotting meat and decay. We heard what sounded like a dog fight happening in the basement, but we only had one dog at the time, and she ran to hide because she heard it too. Those were just the most notable situations that happened, besides hearing small children singing old schoolhouse songs at 4 or 5 in the morning when we were just kids. Every once in a while you could hear a growl, not a dog growl, but a gravelly, gritty, deep growl, damn near in your face. When my parents divorced, we moved into my grandmother's house next door, but that house was also haunted. With the sound of a woman crying around 11 at night, almost every night, the objects being thrown around, it got so bad that my dad had to keep me at his house, which was also haunted. My mom eventually moved into another town, but the houses she lived in were also haunted. My stepdad got pushed downstairs and later got scratched badly. My mom was shoved into a wall so hard her ribs cracked. The spirit seemed to change people's attitudes on a whim. Calm moments would become violent and unnecessarily angry. Now my mom claims that her brother's spirit is around after he committed suicide, and my stepdad claims the same thing about his brother. They both claim to have seen a black hooded mass in their new home. My mom has seen a child in the kitchen when my brother was in school, and she heard the child singing or crying. Before I cut contact with her, I would house sit for her, and would have gruesome nightmares and be awoken by an odd jolting feeling, like being electrocuted but with a sense of anxiety. It scared me so much that I couldn't stay the night, and after I woke up I felt fine. However, the experience left me feeling uneasy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That wasn't the first time I felt this way around my house, and I knew that it wouldn't be the last. As the years went by, my mother and I moved from one haunted house to another, and the hauntings only got worse. It seemed like no matter where we went, the same aggressive spirit followed us, like a lovesick puppy, and it was a complete fucking asshole. I couldn't help but wonder where my mother had picked up this thing that attached to her. And if there was any way to get rid of it without hurting anyone. If it was a demon, what kind was it? Babadook? Christian lore type? The ghost of a pissed-off chicken that KFC slaughtered? I needed to better understand what it was doing so I could repel things like it, keep it away from me and others. But that was easier said than done. And all these years, the spirit continued to follow my mother, and it seemed like it was just waiting for an opportunity to jump to someone else or continue messing with people. It was a disturbing thought that this entity may still be out there looking for another victim to haunt. As for the origin of the entity, it's difficult to say. It's possible that it was somehow connected to the witchcraft that my mother and her friends were experimenting with when I was a child. It may have been attracted to the energy and the attention that they were giving to the spirit world and latched onto my mother as a result. It's also possible that the entity was connected to the properties that we lived in, particularly the old mining house that my mother moved to, the tunnels that once connected the house that they have created a portal to the entirely different world. Whatever its origins may be, the important thing is to find a way to repel it and prevent it from causing harm to anyone else. If it's a demon or malevolent spirit, it may require a spiritual cleansing or exorcism to remove it. Seeking the help of a professional psychic or spiritual healer may be necessary too. It's also important to protect oneself from negative energies and entities by practicing spiritual protection methods such as visualization, prayer, and the use of protective crystals and herbs. In conclusion, my experiences with the malevolent entity that followed my mother have been frightening and traumatic. It's something that I don't wish on anyone, and I hope that by sharing my story, others may be better prepared to deal with similar situations if they ever arise. The paranormal world is a mysterious and often scary place, and it's important to approach it with caution and respect. More weirdness in my otherwise peaceful home. Yesterday evening, I decided to move the phone mount on my motorcycle. The bike was parked on her back deck under the pagoda. My garage was currently filled with my son's old furniture from his apartment. It was getting dark, but I figured it wouldn't take long, so I went ahead with the task. Moving the phone mount was a relatively easy job, but it did require some light. I got the mount into position. I wanted to tighten it enough to stay in place using the small torque screws that came with the kit. I intended to wait until morning to tighten them properly, as it was getting dark and I couldn't see them very well. Once the screws were tight enough to hold the mount in place, I stuck the small wrench that came with the kit on the magnet on the backside of the mount and called it a day. And this morning, when I went out to finish the job, I couldn't find the wrench or the magnet where I'd left it. I searched the whole area, but it was nowhere to be found. I assumed a squirrel or some other animal must have taken it, like the shiny wrench, as it had happened before. As I was about to go inside to get a regular Torx wrench from my toolbox, I noticed that my windshield bag was unsnapped, which was weird because I was very conscientious about keeping it snapped shut. I kept some small items in it that I didn't want to lose. When I checked the bag to my surprise, the wrench was inside, right on top. I found this strange, but I reasoned that maybe I'd struck the wrench to the magnet and I'd put it in the bag instead. It was a plausible explanation and I didn't think much of it. However, when I tried to tighten the mount screws, I realized that they were already fully tightened and I couldn't tighten them any further. They were completely wrenched down. This feeling left me a little freaked out and I talked to my wife and son. Both of them denied touching the bike. I wasn't scared, but I was definitely weirded out by the whole situation. It seemed like something inexplicable had happened with the phone mount and the wrench. I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling and I started to wonder if there was something supernatural or paranormal at play. I've heard stories of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomenon, but I haven't experienced anything like this before. It made me question my logical explanations and rational thinking. Throughout the day, I couldn't help but keep thinking about the incident. I went back to the bike several times, checking the mount and the screws, but everything seemed to be in place. I even tried to recreate the scenario, but I couldn't explain how the screws had tightened on their own. As the day went on, my curiosity turned into a sense of intrigue. I began researching online to see if anyone else had experienced similar incidents with their motorcycle and other objects. I came across forums and stories of people who had encountered strange happenings on their bikes, including unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and even the sightings of ghostly figures near their motorcycles. While I was initially skeptical, the sheer number of accounts and testimonials made me question my skepticism. I delved deeper into the world of the paranormal experience and theories, trying to find answers to what had happened to my motorcycle. I also reached out to a fellow motorcycle enthusiast and asked if they had ever encountered anything similar. Some shared their own eerie stories, while others dismissed it as mere coincidence or natural explanations. Nevertheless, the conversations and discussions added to my fascination with the inexplicable events surrounding my motorcycle. Days turned into weeks and I couldn't shake off the mystery of what had happened to my motorcycle. I became obsessed with finding an explanation, spending hours researching, reading books and articles, and even consulting with experts in the field of the paranormal phenomena. I visited local motorcycle shops and asked if they had heard of similar incidents, but most of them dismissed it as pure coincidence or simply shrugged it off. However, my determination to uncover the truth only grew stronger. I set up cameras around my motorcycle, hoping to capture any unusual activity. I even stayed up late into the night, keeping a vigilant watch, hoping to catch a mysterious occurrence. Weeks turned into months, and despite my efforts, I couldn't find any concrete evidence or explanations for what had happened with my motorcycle. The mount remained secure and the screws stayed tightly fastened. The wrench remained in my toolbox, and there are no more unsnapped bags or strange occurrences. But my curiosity and fascination with the paranormal world continued to grow. I delved deeper into the subject, studying different theories and researching various cases of unexplained phenomena. I connected with others who had experienced similar encounters and exchanged stories and ideas. One day, while browsing through an online forum, I came across a thread discussing supernatural experiences with motorcycles. Some of the stories were eerily similar to what had happened to me. Many riders shared their encounters with unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and inexplicable occurrences surrounding their bikes. Some even claimed to have seen apparitions or felt a strange presence around their motorcycle. One story in particular caught my attention. A fellow rider had shared a similar experience with their phone mount and wrench mysteriously disappearing and reappearing in unexpected places. They also tried to find logical explanations, but eventually concluded that there might be something supernatural at play. This thread led me down a rabbit hole of paranormal stories related to motorcycles. I found tales of haunted roads, cursed bikes, and mysterious motorcycle-related legends from all around the world. The stories were diverse and intriguing, ranging from encounters and ghost riders, from sightings of phantom motorcycles, and even tales of motorcycles that seemed to have a mind of their own. While I was initially skeptical, the sheer volume of stories and accounts from fellow riders made me question my rational explanations. I began to consider the possibility that there might be some truth to these paranormal experiences. As my obsession grew, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to investigators and experts in the field, seeking their help in unraveling the mystery surrounding my bike. I invited them to my home and showed them the camera footage and shared my story in detail. The investigators were intrigued by my experience and conducted thorough investigations around my bike. They used various equipment, including EMF detectors, thermal cameras, and EVP recorders to capture any sign of paranormal activity. We spent several nights monitoring my bike, hoping to capture any unexplained occurrence. Although we didn't capture any definitive evidence, the investigators couldn't fully explain some of the anomalies that we did witness. There were unexplained fluctuations in the electromagnetic fields around the bike, and some of the thermal images showed unusual heat signatures. We also captured some EVP recordings with some mysterious voices that couldn't be explained. The investigators concluded that while there's no concrete evidence of supernatural activity, there were indications that something out of the ordinary might be happening with my bike. They suggested that it could be a case of residual energy or manifestation of a spirit or entity attached to the motorcycle. Armed with this new information, I continued my research and exploration into the world of the paranormal phenomenon. I connected with other riders that had similar encounters and formed a small community of enthusiasts that shared their stories and theories. We discussed possible explanations ranging from residual energy from previous owners to spirits attached to objects to dimensional portals. Despite not finding a definitive answer to what was happening with my motorcycle, my fascination just kept growing stronger. I became increasingly invested in uncovering the truth and understanding the mysterious occurrence that seemed to defy logical explanation. I spent countless hours scouring books, websites, and forums looking for any clue that could shed light on the inexplicable events surrounding my motorcycle. I reached out to experts in the field of the paranormal research, seeking their insight and opinions. I even went on road trips to visit haunted sites and locations known for motorcycle-related legends, hoping to find some answers. During my investigations, I encountered other riders who had experienced similar inexplicable events with their motorcycles. We exchanged stories, shared our theories, and tried to piece together the puzzle. Some believed it was the work of mischievous spirits, while others thought it could be a case of residual energy from previous owners or even a glitch in the fabric of reality. As time went on, I began to experience more strange occurrences around my motorcycle. There were instances of my motorcycle starting up on its own, despite the ignition being off and lights flickering. There were also times when I felt an eerie presence around my bike, as if something or someone was watching me. One night, as I was conducting another investigation around my bike, I noticed a faint glow around the phone mount. As I approached it, the glow seemed to intensify, and I could feel a palpable energy in the air. I cautiously reached out to touch the mount, and as soon as my fingers made contact, I felt a jolt of energy surging through my body. Startled, I pulled my hand back, and the glow dissipated. I was both fascinated and terrified by the experience. It was clear to me that there was something beyond the realm of the ordinary at play here, but what could it be? I decided to dig deeper into my research, exploring more esoteric and lesser-known theories about the intersection of the paranormal and motorcycles. I came across stories of ancient rituals involving motorcycles, tales of motorcycle clubs with secretive occult practices, and even accounts of motorcycles being used as conduits to otherworldly entities. One particular theory that intrigued me was the concept of a motorcycle guardian spirit. According to some beliefs, motorcycles can develop a spiritual presence that protects and watches over their riders. These guardian spirits are said to have their own consciousness and can sometimes exhibit mischievous or malevolent behavior if not appeased or respected. Armed with this, I decided to approach my motorcycle with a different mindset. I began to acknowledge and respect the possibility of a guardian spirit attached to my bike. I would offer prayers and blessings and even performed a ritual of gratitude expressing my appreciation for my motorcyclist's mysterious presence. To my surprise, the strange occurrences around my motorcycle seemed to subside after my change in approach. The mount remained secure and the screws stayed tightly fastened. The wrench remained in my toolbox and there were no more unsnapped bags or unexplained phenomenon. It seemed as though the guardian spirit, if indeed there was one, had accepted my gestures of respect and appreciation. With time, my initial fear and uncertainty gave way to a sense of wonder and awe. I realized that there are still many mysteries in the world that defied rational explanations, and that some phenomena were beyond the reach of science and logic. I continued to share my story and experiences with other riders and enthusiasts, hoping to inspire curiosity and open-mindedness toward the unexplained. I became known as the motorcycle paranormal guy, and was even invited to speak at local motorcycle clubs and events about my journey about the world and the paranormal and motorcycles. In the end, while I never found a definitive answer to the strange occurrences surrounding my motorcycle, my journey led me to a deeper appreciation for the mysteries of the universe and the intricate connections between the physical and metaphysical realms. I learned to approach the unknown with an open mind, to respect the possibility of unseen forces at play, and to be willing to explore unconventional explanations. My experience had taught me that there were countless mysteries waiting to be unraveled, and that the human understanding of reality was limited to our current knowledge and perceptions. As time passed, my motorcycle became more than just a mode of transportation. It became a symbol of curiosity, exploration, and the unexplained. It served as a reminder that there were still realms beyond our comprehension, and that there were forces at play in the world that defied conventional understanding. I continued to enjoy riding my bike, relishing the freedom and the thrill that it brought me. But now, with a newfound reverence for the unknown, I remained vigilant, keeping an eye for any further unexplained events, but also embracing the mystery and the notion that some things may never have a definitive explanation. Occasionally, I would still notice a faint glow around the phone mount, and I would offer a silent nod of acknowledgement, acknowledging the possibility of the guardian spirit that might still be watching over my motorcycle. But whatever it was a playful spirit, a residual energy, or simply a series of coincidences. I'd come to accept that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. In the end, my journey into the world of the paranormal and motorcycles had not only expanded my understanding of the unknown, but had also enriched my life with a sense of wonder and awe. I had opened my mind to the new perspectives, deepened my appreciation for the intricacies of the universe, and given me a unique story to share with others. So, as I continued to ride my motorcycle with the phone mount securely in place and the wrench safely in my toolbox, I'm reminded of the enigmatic nature of our world and the infinite possibilities that lie beyond our comprehension. And while I may never have a definitive answer to the strange occurrences surrounding my motorcycle, I am confident in knowing that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, and that the unknown will always hold a sense of intrigue and fascination for those willing to embrace its enigmatic allure. When I was younger, I experienced some pretty strange things in my house. There were two incidents in particular that stood out to me. The first one happened while I was doing laundry in my room. I happened to glance over at my closet and saw one of my pant legs fly out like it was being blown around, and I heard a loud noise like an elephant. The thing was, there were no vents or anything else that would have caused the air to blow like that. The closet was narrow and the door was off, so no one could have hidden inside. I even kept the door shut so my cat couldn't come in. It was the same room where my sister swore that a box had jumped in the air. She didn't imagine it because the cat actually hissed at the box when it happened. I would also hear rustling plastic bags, but I suppose it could have just been a rodent. But what was really strange is that I'd often hear my sister walking past my room to get to hers, but I'd go to greet her only to find no one there. The second incident happened in the backyard when I was playing with my dog late at night. He was a big husky, and he was usually fearless, but I saw him hunker down across the yard and whine before running over to me in the deck. I decided to investigate and found a very tall, dark brown, glossy-looking thing standing in a narrow alley between the shed and the fence. It was half covered in shadow, so I couldn't see its head or any other detail, but it looked like a straight body with soggy, wet brown fur. I didn't hear anything, and my knees started shaking to the point where I thought they would give out. I ran back inside, scared out of my wits. I later saw a strange-looking face at the same spot while looking out the upstairs window, but I was far away, so I could have imagined that. For the record, no one died in the house as far as we knew. My dad had built the whole second floor, the garage, and the shed in the back, and half the basement. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Maybe one of my siblings, or I, had brought something paranormal into the house. But I believed that the negative energy that hung around could have caused strange things to happen. My mother was emotionally abusive to my siblings and me, and she even got physical with us several times. Perhaps her negative energy had an effect on the house. I always felt uneasy in the hallway and refused to sleep in the bedroom alone until I was 13. I had pretty creepy dreams about that room while sleeping in it. In one dream, there was a witch in there, and in another dream, the light went out and I had to go get a new bulb. When I came back, there was a ghost dude standing in the middle of the room. I got so scared that I fell over, and that's when I woke up. The feeling of fear stayed with me throughout the whole day. All in all, I'm not sure what was going on in my house, but I know that those experiences were real. Perhaps it was all just coincidence, or maybe there was something paranormal happening. Whatever the case may be, those memories have stayed with me for a long time. Not so sure if I should share it here or someplace else, but this is an experience I've had. When I was a young lad around 5 or 7 years old, I used to work with my grandfather. Well, it was more like playing on his phone, but that's beside the point. One day while we were out, I found a stray yellow ball sitting in a ditch. It called out to me in a strange way. I couldn't resist taking it home with me. For the first 2 days, nothing happened. I didn't expect anything to happen, really. But on the third night, I had the urge to sleep with the ball in my bed because I wanted my old stuffed bear. I fell asleep quickly, but I woke up around 12 or 1 in the morning from a strange dream. In my dream, I was pushing a green cart from that ditch to where my grandparents' home was. There was a small child singing, and when I woke up, I found myself suffering from sleep paralysis. I slept on a bunk bed on the bottom bunk, and the top bunk was filled with boxes, so really nothing was able to be up there without sitting on the boxes. When I awoke, I found myself unable to move except my eyes. I saw a white fabric draped over the side of the top bunk. It was possibly a dress, and the singing was continuing. The only lyric I remembered that rings in my head is, "Put a smile on it," and something about sunshine. When I was finally able to move, I ran right out of the room, being too afraid to enter again. But when my grandfather woke up upset, he walked in, saw me the way I was, and after explaining, he grabbed the ball and stabbed it, destroying the vessel. This could have just been a coincidence, but before he stabbed it, I felt the ball and it was ice cold, and mind you, This was in Florida, and nothing should really be naturally ice cold. After that incident, a few years passed by, and I forgot about it all. Suddenly I woke up with sleep paralysis again, and there she was, the small girl standing in the distance. She was muttering something, and then she dashed straight towards me. I couldn't see her features since it was dark, but all I knew is that she wore a long white dress and had long dark brown, almost black hair that shadowed her face. Over the years I had other experiences that were similar to this one, just with singing and standing in the distance. But this one with the yellow ball and the girl in the white dress were the most unsettling to me. It left me wondering about the connection between the ball and the girl and what could have happened if my grandfather hadn't destroyed it. Was it a coincidence or was it something else? These questions linger in my mind to this day. During my elementary and middle school years, I attended a school that was situated right next to a graveyard. I, along with many other students, have witnessed strange things in the corners of our eyes, and have felt deep feelings of dread or sadness. The worst case, however, was when a few students complained about feeling as if they were being touched randomly, and how they sometimes felt as if there was a little pull on the grabbed part. One year, when I was in 5th grade, a new transfer student came in. He was a big, scaredy cat, and no one even warned him about the strange occurrences. During one class, he suddenly screamed at the top of his lungs as if he fell off his chair and started pointing at the classroom door. He claimed to have seen a hand holding a severed head with a big, creepy smile peeking out of it. At first, no one believed him since the classroom door was shut at the start of the lesson. I was probably the first person to look at the door to confirm what had happened, and to my surprise, I found it partially open. There was no sound of the door opening, which was a strange occurrence, since the door in that classroom was always so noisy. Luckily, this was the only major incident that happened throughout the rest of the years that I spent at the school, but there were no more panicking or other bizarre occurrences that happened other than the transfer student leaving the school. But 12 years later, I found out that there were actually some graves in the school area. The school had supposedly run out of space and needed more places to fit children. The graves had been there for a long time and no one visited them anyway. It was a load of bullcrap to say the least. I don't know if it was illegal or not, but the school authorities for sure weren't arrested. The strange happenings in that school made a lot of sense now. It was eerie to think about. I, along with my classmates, had been studying and playing so close to the graves of those who had passed away. The experiences made me believe that there are things beyond our understanding, and that we should always be aware of the history and significance of places that we inhabit. And it happened again. About 20 days ago, I had a foresight that I really didn't want to have come true, and unfortunately, just 2 days after posting about it, it did come true. It was fascinating and unsettling at the same time. And now, I've had another twitch, but this one is different. A couple of days ago, I saw imagery in my head of a city skyline at night, and what appeared to be my car parked on the side of the road. But this visualization gave me a sense of panic and anxiety. I don't know if it's a premonition or something bad happening to me, or if it's just my imagination running wild, but it's really bothering me. I felt compelled to share this experience with others, even though I know some may not believe me, but I'm hoping that someone can help me make sense of it all. Maybe someone can give me some insight into what it might mean or what I should do about it. If anyone needs more information about the image I saw, I can provide more details. It's a strange feeling to have these premonitions, especially when they feel so real and vivid. I don't know if they're just random thoughts or if they have some kind of significance, but I can't shake the feeling that something is going to happen. And if it does, I just hope I'm prepared for it. I'm trying not to let this consume me, but it's difficult when it feels like something's looming over me. It's like waiting for a storm to hit and you don't know how bad it's going to be when it'll arrive. I just wish I knew how to do it or how to stop it from happening. But for now, all I can do is wait and try to be ready for whatever comes my way. I've been having visions of the future for a while now, and for some reason, I always find myself coming back to share my story, for better or worse. My latest vision was quite an experience, but thankfully, someone in the comments really helped me out. I was on my way out to the city, and I'd rather not name when, but I got a flat tire, and luckily, a tire plug kit came in really handy, and I would have been screwed without it, honestly. This one might be a little bit longer than usual, as I want to try to hash out what these visions are and what they actually mean. Let me start by explaining one I had just 3 days ago. This one felt oddly ominous, for reasons that we'll get into later. Excuse any literacy or typos, as I can't say I'm the brightest cookie in the batch. It was around 8 a.m. on Monday, now sitting in my car getting ready to go to work for the day, when it happened. A strange twitching feeling set an odd shock through my body, unlike any other twitch or muscle or chill. It was quickly accompanied by a series of mental images through my head, vivid pictures of me in a forest at night, seeming to have mud on my hands while crouched down, and the last one was me and some other figure in a hoodie by a building. I'm not a printer, so I can't say how much more detail without these weird spikes of my imagination. One thing to note is that I'm an avid airsoft player and even spend some time playing sport. However, I've never played at night, although night games are a thing. Sometimes these flashes in general, though, are alarming. Each vision I get normally gives me a sense of panic, but this one feels odd to me. I want to chalk it up to maybe envisioning a game of airsoft at late night, but I can't shake the feeling that this may be more ominous than I'd like it to be. If anyone takes the time to read this or hear this, I hope you can try to help me make sense of it. Outside opinions really help, and I just wonder why all of a sudden these things become more ominous than they've been for the past year or so, before the couple of bad ones. It's almost as if something's trying to warn me or tell me something, but I just can't quite figure out what it is. Maybe it's just my imagination running wild, or maybe it's something more. All I know is that these visions have become a part of my life, for better or worse. Does anyone remember this story? It's been 9 years since I've heard this story, and I'm not very thrilled to be the storyteller, so bear with me. I also may not get all the details exactly right. I honestly don't even know if the story actually existed, and it was just a bunch of made-up stuff from kids I went to school with, but a lot of my classmates used to recite this story an awful lot, so I figure it may come for the internet from me. All I know is that it used to creep me out. Keep in mind, here's a few alternate versions of the story too, but I'm not going to go into those, so I'm going to stick to just this one. So anyway, it went something along the lines of this. There's this family, a mother, father, and daughter. The daughter's name was Sally, I think. I don't think the parents were named originally for the sake of the retelling. I'm going to call them Mary and John. I can't for the life of me remember accurately. I don't know the reason why, but there comes a point where Mary and John decide to get rid of their daughter. I may be wrong, but I believe it could have been because of her bad behavior issues or something like that. So anyway, by get rid of, I mean they literally take Sally to a random location in the middle of nowhere and just leave her there. Again, I'm a little foggy on the details, but I'm pretty sure the parents decide to murder her and dump the body somewhere that won't really be found. A bit extreme, but to each their own, I suppose. So once the body's dealt with, John and Mary return home and go to bed. Fast forward a couple weeks and the parents are in bed trying to sleep when John's awoken by the faint sound of a voice. Concerned and scared, he gets up to go check it out. He searches the house but finds nothing and assumes it was just a dream. The following night, the same thing occurs, but this time, the voice is heard by both parents. John explains his experiences from the night prior, and both him and his wife become increasingly worried that maybe someone might be in the house. Both sit quietly for a moment until they hear the voice again. They begin to realize that the voice is repeating itself every few seconds, and they can't seem to make out what it's saying as it's too quiet. Suddenly the voice stops. John hesitantly scouts the house once again, finds nothing. The next night, Mary's unable to sleep due to her paranoia about what had happened previously. In an attempt to ease her mind, she checks that all the doors and windows in the house are locked. After getting back into bed hoping to fall asleep, she suddenly hears the voices again. Terrified, she quickly wakes her husband, and like before, the voice seemed to repeat itself at an interval of a few seconds, though this time it's different. This time the voices become slightly louder and clearer. John and Mary are petrified when they recognize the voice as none other than Sally's. They sit in fear as Sally's voice softly and repeatedly chants the word, "Sally is 70 miles away." After speaking these lines for several minutes, the voice stops once again. John and Mary consider calling the police, but ultimately come to the conclusion that this would be a risk that they'd get caught. From that night onward, John and Mary would try their best to ignore the horrifying voice of what seemed to be their own daughter chanting each night. Since the police were not an option, there was really nothing they could do but hope that some kind of prank or something was happening. They really didn't know what to believe. There was no way that this could be possible. Hearing their own deceased daughter's voice, they had noticed that a family with seemingly troublesome children had moved in next door, not long after Sally's death. Mary had witnessed these kids messing around with other people's property before, like damaging mailboxes and such. But with this in mind, Mary and John hoped that they were just getting messed with. However, at the same time, the chanting continued, and things only got more unsettling. Each night the voice would get louder and seem to get closer, and they would say the same thing, but with one small difference each time. It would claim to be closer each night. When the voice first became audible to John and Mary, it spoke the words, "Sally is 70 miles away," and the night after that, "Sally is 60 miles away," and then 50, 40, 30, and so on. By this point, both parents would refuse to sleep, staying up all night scared and disturbed as to what they were hearing, until one night it stopped. Finally, after a week of listening in horror and being deprived of sleep, Mary and John were able to get some. Things returned to normal, and through their experience, then left them terrified. The couple tried their best to forget both what had happened and what had been done to their daughter. They moved on and they were living their lives normally. This was until one night after several weeks they heard the voice again, and this time it was loudest and the closest it had ever been. John and Mary were in complete disbelief as to what they were hearing. Mary on the verge of tears yelling out for the voice to stop while John sat silent, too scared to talk. Again, the voice would say its chant, but this time it was different. This time it began with, "Sally is at your front door." A few moments later, the voice would speak again and say, "Sally is in the kitchen." But this time, John and Mary were the most scared they had ever been in their lives, with the covers pulled up to their mouths as they sat, unable to move, looking straight ahead, waiting and hoping it would go away. After almost a minute of waiting, the voice spoke again, "Sally is at your bedroom door." A few weeks later, the parents were found dead in their bed, covered in blood. Demonic knocks. I never thought I'd experience anything like this before. I was always a skeptic when it came to the paranormal, but everything changed that one fateful night. I was sitting in my living room, staring intently at my computer screen when I heard a series of knocks on my front door. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but then it happened again and again. The knocking grew louder and more forceful with each repetition, until it turned into a deafening pounding that shook my entire house. I was terrified, frozen in place, unsure of what to do. I knew I shouldn't answer the door, but the pounding was so persistent that I felt like I had no other choice. I cautiously made my way to the door, heart pounding in my chest, and peered through the peephole. To my surprise, no one was there, just an empty porch, bathed in an eerie light of the moon. But the knocking didn't stop. It continued and so on, till I realized that it wasn't coming from the wooden door at all. It was coming from my glass sliding door, the one that led to my backyard. I hesitated for a moment, but eventually mustered up the courage to take the look. As I approached the door, I could feel a chill run down my spine. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I peered through the glass, and that's when I saw it. It was a figure shrouded in darkness. It had black hair that cascaded down its body, and arms that stretched all the way to its knees. I couldn't see its face, but I could hear it mumbling something under its breath. The figure was so tall that it obscured the porch light with its head. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak, and then suddenly the figure took off running, racing around my house with lightning speed. I could hear its footsteps pounding against the ground, the sound growing fainter and fainter until it eventually disappeared completely. The next morning I went outside to investigate, and that's when I saw it. A trail of water on my porch, leading to a chair that was sitting on the other side of a glass door. The chair looked like it had been sat in, and there was a damp spot where the figure had been. I took pictures of everything determined to document the strange occurrence. But even as I sat inside my house safe and sound, I could hear the figure outside, still mumbling incoherently as it ran around my property. I had no idea what I was dealing with, but I knew that it was something beyond my understanding, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to make it go away. Experience while sleeping in my dead great-grandmother's room. I remember the night like it was yesterday. I was staying with my grandparents and aunt in Bryan, Texas when I was 12 years old. My dad was with us the first night, but he had to head off to do some work and left me with my grandparents for the remainder of the stay. I was staying in the room where my grandparents were caring for my since-departed great-grandmother, since it was the only free room in the house. The couple nights leading up into the incident, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Then on the third night, things took a turn. I went to bed like usual and everything was fine. I always left the door cracked, so it was also cracked on this specific night. The first thing I remember that startled me was the old rotary phone that makes noises out of nowhere. I don't know exactly how they work, but it made a really, really long continuous beeping noise, like beep, for what felt like 2 or 3 minutes before it stopped. It kind of freaked me out, but I didn't really think much of it. It eventually stopped on its own, which made me feel better. But the thing that really scared me was shortly after the beep stopped. I noticed a shadow outside the cracked door, which appeared to be someone walking by, which didn't startle me at first, but as it went by, the door slammed really hard. My scared 12-year-old self instantly pulled the blankets over my head, and I was scared, but eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up and saw my aunt, and she seemed terrified. I asked her what was wrong, and she asked if I was walking around last night. I said no. She seemed really scared, so I asked why she asked. She said she was awake in bed last night and heard something making noise. She said that she stared at the door and it opened and a tall black figure made its way into her room. Her bed was positioned so that there was a small gap between the bed and the wall, and she told me she saw the figure and got scared and basically rolled herself in her blanket into the gap between her bed and the wall and stayed there all night out of fear. This all freaked me out quite a bit. We both thought it was maybe her dad walking around at night. We also forgot to mention until now that the house also had a home security system that made a very loud beep every time a door or window was opened. So neither of us thought that it could be a home invasion or anything like that. Then, not 5 minutes later, both her parents woke up and came out of their room and asked if they were walking around last night because they heard lots of noises too. Neither me nor their aunt really said anything about it to each other since, but I think we both came to the same realization. Looking back, it's hard to believe that we were all just brushing it off like it was nothing. It was as if we were all in denial, trying to rationalize the noises and the shadow as something other than what it really was, but deep down, I knew that it wasn't normal. I had never experienced anything like it before, and I hope I never will again. As we packed up to leave my grandparents' house, there was a feeling of unease that lingered in the air. We all tried to shake it off, but it was hard to ignore the strange events of the past few nights. I didn't bring it up to my dad as I didn't want to scare him, but I couldn't help but feel that something was off. Until this day, I still wonder what really happened that night. And if we were all in the living room, we started to hear the noise and footsteps upstairs. It was clear and distinct, like someone was walking around up there. We all froze and looked at each other in disbelief. We knew that we were the only ones in the house, and we couldn't deny that we were hearing it. We sat in silence listening to the footsteps for what felt like an eternity. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. Finally, my aunt got up and said she's going to go check it. We tried to stop her, but she was determined to find out what was going on. As she climbed the stairs, the footsteps got louder and faster. It was like the person was running back and forth. We heard my aunt scream and we all ran upstairs to see what was happening. When we got to the top, my aunt was standing in the hallway, shaking and crying. She said she saw the figure at the end of the hallway, but it disappeared when she got closer. We didn't see anything, but we could feel the presence of something there. We were all scared out of our minds and didn't know what to do. We ended up calling a local paranormal investigator to come check out the house. They did an investigation and found that the house was indeed haunted. They picked up EVPs and had strange experiences while they were there. They told us that the entity in the house wasn't harmful, but it was still unsettling to know that we were sharing a house with a ghost. After the experience, we never really stayed at my aunt's house again. We were all too scared to go back. Until this day, we still talk about that night that changed our belief about the paranormal, and that's something you'll never forget. Interaction with my mom. In 2006, I lost my mother to a brain aneurysm. It was a devastating blow to me, as my dad was never really there for me and my mom was my whole world. A few months later, my dad decided to move into a new woman who didn't really like me and I didn't really like her. She wanted me to call her Mom, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. She didn't like my friends or anything that I did. It made living at home a nightmare. To make matters worse, I started cutting myself when I was 13. My dad didn't find out until I spent my 17th birthday in a mental facility. When I got out, things were still terrible at home. The only bright spot was that I became involved with a woman's son who I found very attractive. She didn't know about our relationship, but I didn't care. In November, my dad and his girlfriend decided to kick me out of the house because I took some of his prescription pills and sold them at school. I withdraw from school because I get expelled, but it didn't matter. My dad chose his girlfriend over me, and it was heartbreaking. I ended up in a detention center, which is similar to a juvenile shelter. That's when the strange things started happening, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see my mom sitting on the nightstand. At first I was scared and confused. How could my mom be here? Was she still alive, even though I watched her take her last breath? But after a few nights, I started looking forward to see her. We would have long conversations until early morning, and it was like she was really there with me. I didn't tell anyone about it, and I was afraid that they would think I was crazy. Have any of you ever experienced anything like this? I don't know if it was just my mind playing tricks on me or my mom's spirit was really there, but either way, it brought me comfort during a very difficult time. Anybody know what this was? It was a few years ago, around 7 to be exact, when I experienced something that I still can't explain to this day. I was at home with my ex-boyfriend and 2 other friends. My ex was standing in the doorway, one friend was sitting on the floor near the doorway, and the other was sitting on the TV stand at the foot of the bed. I was on the bed facing the doorway, and we were all just hanging out and chatting. Suddenly I jumped, and I was startled by something that I saw behind my ex. It was weird looking and looked like a black wolf that smiled, almost as if it was half human, part animal. I told my ex what I saw, and he said that he felt like he was pushed too, because we both jumped at the same time. That experience stayed with me for years until 2018 when I was in California. I met a guy out there who I had a prior connection to. When I was at his place, I saw the same wolf-like thing on a mask on his wall. It was a shocking realization. I couldn't help but wonder what it was and why I kept seeing it. I've been trying to gather more information about this wolf-like creature, but so far, haven't found anything concrete. It's like it's a mystery that only a few people know about, and I'm left to wonder what it all means. All I know is that I never want to experience anything like that again, and I'll be sure to avoid any places or people that have anything to do with that creature. Back when I used to work in a half-shut-down hospital, I never experienced or encountered anything paranormal. The hospital had been closed for quite some time, but the company I worked for bought it as a satellite emergency room. However, due to lack of awareness about our services, the first few months were rather slow and uneventful. One of the doctors I worked with was into ghost hunting, and he often encouraged me to explore the old parts of the hospital during my night shifts. I wasn't really into the idea, but one night he gave me a radar and convinced me to go down to the back room. I didn't expect to find anything, but I went along anyway. As I was finishing up my exploration and preparing to go on a cigarette break, I heard a voice in the pitch darkness. It simply said, "Don't smoke." I froze in place and looked down at my unlit cigarette in my hand, unable to believe what I'd just heard and what had just happened. In that moment, I was completely spooked, and I immediately ran out of the room. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, and it lingered with me for days after the incident. It's worth noting that I quit smoking about 5 or 6 years ago now, and that experience may have played a role in that decision. Despite my skepticism about the paranormal, this experience definitely made me more open to the possibility that there may be more to this world than what we can see or understand. It's a memory that stayed with me for years. It's one that still gives me chills to this day. One of my many encounters. I remember this one encounter from 4 or 5 years ago that still gives me chills. It happened when my sister and I got home from playing volleyball, and I found that no one was home. We called our family and found out that we were at our cousin's house, and a few of our siblings would come back and pick us up. While we waited, my sister and I decided to hang out in my parents' room because she wanted to use the computer. We closed and locked the door for some reason, and I started playing games on my phone. And she was busy clicking away on the keyboard. It was completely silent except for the sound of the mouse and keyboard when we suddenly heard a loud bang on the front door, followed by footsteps running away from it. We were both terrified by the sudden noise and just stared at each other and the door. We thought that maybe our siblings had returned, and they were playing a prank on us. So we decided to check the whole house, every room and the garage. However, we found no one, and we immediately went back to my parents' room and locked the door again. We were shaken up by what had just happened and couldn't help but discuss the fact that we both heard footsteps running away from the door. We were lucky that our siblings arrived soon after. We quickly ran out to meet them and told them about everything that had happened. This encounter is the one that still stands out the most for me, and it still terrifies me to this day. Our empty house isn't as empty as we thought. Yesterday I came home from being in town to run a quick errand. I rang the doorbell since the door was locked and my boyfriend opened. "Damn, you're fast," he explained. I was a little confused because I'd been gone for maybe 30 minutes, which isn't that fast, considering he let me borrow his electric bike, and I didn't pay it any mind. After he let me in, he yelled, "Annie, your sister's home." "Annie's still at school. It's only 11 at noon," I answered. My boyfriend looked confused. "Who's home then? Your parents don't get out of work yet, do they?" "No, they get home at like 4. "Oh, okay. What did you forget, by the way? You must have biked like a madman to get here and back that fast," he remarked. "I didn't forget anything. I don't have the keys, remember?" My boyfriend relayed that to me. After I left, he could hear someone walking around the house, doors opening and closing, and other everyday noises. It was so loud and clear, he just assumed it was my sister or me getting home. I've been telling him that there's something in the house, but he hasn't experienced it himself before now. I always find myself yelling, "Hello," to the empty rooms because it sounds like someone's walking around, closing and opening doors, and the rustling of fabric. I saw what haunted my boyfriend as a child. This is a very strange, and at first I thought this belonged in a dream or night terror for him. Now I'm not sure. My boyfriend and I have been together for 9 years now, I've always suffered from night terrors. However, that's not something you bring up on a first date. This was back when my boyfriend and I had been dating for a few months, and I had recently started sleeping together. We were sleeping at his place. I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed we were holding hands. I thought it was cute, but I noticed that his hand was so pale and thin. My eyes got used to the darkness, and I saw his hands crossed on his stomach while I was holding a third, pale hand. As I became aware of this, something that looked like a woman with long black hair hanging over her face sat up from behind my boyfriend's form, looked at me, and laid back down. I stroked the hand with my thumb as you do when you're holding hands with someone. I don't know why I did that. I just wrote it off as a dream logic. This was in the beginning of our relationship, so I didn't tell him about it because I didn't want him to think I was crazy. Years passed, and now we're living together. He's very aware of my paranormal beliefs and night terrors. Out of nowhere, I came to think of that dream. Did I ever tell you about that night terror I had at house when we recently got together? I asked him with a little laugh. I saw someone who looked like Sadako in your bed when we slept. I almost got jelly. I joked, but he didn't laugh. He got very pale and said, "Did she try to hold your hand?" I got taken back by his reaction. I told him I did hold her hand, and even remember stroking it with my thumb. My boyfriend then revealed to me that as a child, he'd have a recurring nightmare that a woman with long black hair and white hands tried to hold his hand, but he'd wake up in a panic before she ever got to him. He'd never told me this because he just wrote it off as a childhood nightmare. Now neither of us think they're nightmares anymore. My mystery about hours and minutes. Let's say that in my life, I witnessed a couple paranormal episodes, maybe years ago, and maybe I'll ask for explanations later, but now I'm more interested in another very strange issue that has tormented me for years. Since I was 18 or 19, it happened to me many times to look at the clock and see marked, for example, at night I come home after work or after being with friends, and I don't look at the clock right away. But too often, it is 3:33. I wake up at night and go to the bathroom and drink. I look at the time, and 4 times out of 5, it is 3:33. In the afternoon, especially if I'm at work, I try not to look at the time. But punctuality, or it's 3:33 or 3:34. What connection is there to these minutes? I waited until I was 33 to ask for this. I'll definitely be teased, I don't know. But it's a coincidence too much too strange. Is there a link to something? Does it have any meaning in numerology? Do you think ghosts like to mess with people more when they aren't recording? For example, we were doing an investigation in an old jail located in Globe, Arizona. One of the stories was that when volunteers were turning off all the breakers, sometimes they would report hearing a jail cell door slam. Long story short, one of my guys had to run out and grab some gear. He had just gotten back into town. We needed to eat before locking down for the rest of the night. When I went to turn the power off, I got to the last breaker, and after turning it off, I heard 3 loud and distinct knocks from behind me. I jumped out of my skin. I screamed out to ask if there was someone playing tricks on me. Nothing. I walked up front to the guy talking, and he didn't hear a thing. Not even me calling out to them. Or another time, I went to the bathroom at another location. At the time, a phone started ringing like an old rotary phone style. My 2 teammates and the host all heard this. The The thing is, there are no phones working in the building, and everyone had their cell phone on them. None went off. The tie-in here, both times, we didn't have gear and able to record or capture it as we were just setting up or finishing a tour. And those have been some of the most intense things we've experienced as far as what we think could have been true paranormal activity. Do you think that spirits are more willing to make themselves known when they think they aren't being recorded? Does that play into it at all? Or just happens to be a sort of coincidence? A ghost in my friend's house broke the attic door and scared me to death. When I was 19, my college friend Jack asked me to take care of his house and pet due to him and his family leaving somewhere. My friend had a normal house which can fit in a normal-sized family. It was Sunday, I had nothing to do, so I wanted to help and be a responsible guy. They all left the house around 7 p.m. I began watching some love movies and other things that were displayed on TV by that time. 5 hours later, the dog started barking, so I thought he wanted to go outside or eat something. I filled his bowl with dog food when Jack left for me, but he was barking and even shaking. I opened the door to the yard and he immediately ran from the house. I guess that he just needed to go do dog things. Well, he wasn't outside for the past 5 hours. I kept watching whatever showed up on the TV. I kind of wanted to sleep, but I couldn't do it for obvious reasons. 2 hours later, I ran to the yard door to let the dog in. I felt bad that he was there the whole time. I forgot about him. He was sleeping under a small tree like nothing. I took the dog inside by force when he suddenly started barking and shaking so hard that he got out of my arms, ran to the backyard when he became peaceful. Later on, the attic door shut with a huge force that I thought they totally broke it, and I'm in trouble for ruining the house. But after a second, I realized who could have done that. I went upstairs just to see broken doors, which were barely holding up. I was about to come down when they started to close and open itself really fast that I froze. The noise was so loud that the dog started barking even louder from the outside. I ran downstairs to the yard door, opened them as fast as I could, ran outside, and hid in the bushes. The dog was still barking for a good 5 minutes. I managed to smoke 3 cigarettes in that bush. I spent the rest of the night outside without any jacket, just a sweater and a dog. When Jack came home around 8 a.m., I showed him what happened last night, knowing that I'm in huge trouble for not fulfilling my duty. He reacted without anger or anything. He looked more worried than angry when I told him what happened. Finally, he experienced that his uncle died and they were going to another state for the funeral. The house was built by him for years before. I guess he just wanted to say goodbye to his old place. I also realized that the dog wanted to warn me as he felt bad energy in that house.